Alright, so here I am again building another virtual tank in a video game. This is the AEV3, and I believe they call it the Kodiak. It's a little engineering vehicle built on the chassis of a Leopard 2. And I haven't really built anything like this with like a... Well, I'm not going to build this one. This one has a mine plow on it, but like a bulldozer blade and an excavator bucket. Normally it's just tanks with either turrets, but I always have guns, so casemate turret tank, one of those. But this time it's different because I'm gonna be, well, recording the process, and hopefully you'll find this useful for something. Even though I am going to be building this in GMod, as of late I've been liking basically making part of the model in Blender anyway. And this time it's no different. Now, what I should have said actually is I like to get ready to build it in a way. But basically what I'm looking at right here is a scale cube, because I like having these things around. I don't really use references that much. I just sort of go to Google Images and look at various pictures of the tanks and just sort of eye it basically. Now, another thing you could do alternatively is, if I go to GMod, there's a nice little E2 that Lefty made. Let me see if I can find it. Scale. And unfortunately, I don't have my scale parameters, so let me just... Okay. So let me actually make sure this is orientated the right way. Yeah, that looks about right. But basically, I like to at least have a scale that I can build inside of, and also the dimensions. By the way, I just looked up, or looked on the Wikipedia article, or page for the Kodiak, and just copy pasted those there, or in this case over here. And these take 1-inch units, so I converted them to meters. So now I'm gonna go back to Blender and make the really simple tank outline and import it, and tweak it, get the dimensions right, and I will be back then. Alright, so I got that basic mesh put together, and you might realize we're not actually looking at the vehicle I said I was gonna make, and that's because I was using a reference of a Leopard 2. Because the vehicle is basically another vehicle on the Leopard 2, but I wanted to get the proportions right, and you can actually see quite a bit smaller than, or off from my scale cube, because I was looking at it in GMod. But actually that's another thing that's kind of interesting I should probably talk about now. So once I have my mesh, I can select it, go on over to File, Export, and I'm just going to export it as a .obj. Now, PropInertia can import .obj files, but you have to put them in your Gary's Mod data P2M folder, and I just have a favorite for that. But basically, I have a preset here, and you can save presets, so I just have that set there. And I have limited to selection only. Transform, I scale it up by 39.37, because I believe this export, or this will import into GMod as 1 unit is 1 inch basically. And for geometry, the only thing I have is apply modifiers. So I can go ahead and give it a name, export it, and head on over to GMod. Find PropInertia. Hold C, then right click it. Open editor, .obj. Look for which one I want to import. Right click, add obj. And one thing you really want to do is go ahead and hit invert normals, because they import the wrong way. There we go. But basically shortened it a bit because the first one, or the earlier ones I was playing with, someone looked off about it, and basically it was too long, and I've had a couple of friends actually help me out with this. So see, there's another leopard over here, and definitely not perfect, but I thought it was close enough, basically, in proportions. But yeah, that's how you can import a mesh with PropInertia. Alright, so it's not perfect and very basic, but I'm finally somewhere happy with my base mesh. Yeah, and I even modeled the sort of asymmetric part of the vehicle, so you can see to the left and to the right there. Now actually from here I'm gonna rebuild this and basically make all the angles like clean, basically. So kind of like how you position props with PA and you know, change their coordinates and rotation. I'm gonna do a similar sort of thing just to make it all flat, basically. But I also have this thing in GMod over here, and basically after I make the newer mesh, from this point on it's just gonna be, well, putting a bunch of props everywhere. And you can see I even have a little engine I made for it. So basically just a bit of a update on the progress I've been getting up to. Alright, so I spammed a few props on this thing, mostly in the whole front, that I did just about finish the excavator arm model for this. So what I wanted to do is go ahead and set this up now, and actually I can show you around a little bit. If I just turn off the mesh, so you can see I'm gonna need to animate these like pivot points and hydraulic arms. But basically I have a plan for this, and that's because before I built this I could make this out of settings, but instead what I have is basically something using hydraulics, and for the most part it's, I shouldn't have unfroze that. But for the most part, the hydraulics on these pieces are fairly straightforward. I actually spaced them out a little bit, as you can see. Interesting. But the hydraulics for this, because this thing can rotate, or mine's going to be able to rotate 360 degrees, so I do have a prototype for this, and basically it's, let me actually bring that back up. So you can kind of see how it works here if I just somehow leave my tool out. Let's just grab the lever and move it. How about that? Oh dear. Find the tool gun. There we go. Alright, so if I grab the lever, you can kind of see how that works. So basically these hydraulics, the points that rotate around are actually just connected to that spinning prop right there. So basically that. And so those points rotate around and they're connected to that plate. And this little point right here, they all connect to this common point, and that is connected to the base. Right now it's a bit, well, I'd say it's reasonably strong as long as you don't like move the hydraulics really fast, but it is kind of limp, and basically what I could do is increase the leverage. Let me get my tool gun again. So right now I believe these are 144 units out, but I'm probably going to make it wider on this. And also as I added more weight to this, it became weaker and weaker, so I'm gonna, the plan is to do the same sort of structure on this thing. So I'll let you know how that goes and get to that. Okay, so I've not actually made the crane work yet. Well, sort of, but I'm pretty happy with it so far. Let me actually show you what I did. So, I went ahead and added some prop to mesh cubes so that there's less basically props able to look at and lower my frame rate, and I guess for that matter anyone else's. But basically have all the static segments prop to mesh, and they actually have their little bases as well. So I have my bucket, 1 segment, 2 segment, and also my spinner over here. So I can actually show you. Okay, these are in a way. You know, that's fine. I'll just. Yeah, you can see that rotates kind of freely. No. It's kind of awkward to do with the phase gun, but yeah, you can see it just sort of hinges around. And basically, what I did was I went ahead and used PA to put the points around the little joint models I used. So I have one over there between that arm and the bucket, and between this arm and this arm, right around here. And actually I can show you that. Straight remover. So you can see my axis. There's an axis there. And another here. Let me go ahead and disable rendering for the mesh. Which is something I like. And yeah, okay. Actually, if I were to just drop that and okay, that's, yeah, it'll probably be fine. Yeah, that needs to be stronger probably, but I was just pretty happy with the way this turned out. It is quite the long excavator arm. Now the real one actually has 3 segments, but I decided to go with 2 for just arbitrary reasons actually. Okay, I should probably go ahead and make the hydraulics for this so you can actually move it around and also animate these things. So I'll come back when and let you know how that goes. Alright, so I finally hooked up all my hydraulics to the arm itself. The pistons still don't animate, but got my rotator hydraulics, the hydraulics for arm 1, arm 2, and the bucket, and some very, very specific hydraulic values that all those use. But this is actually the second time I've placed the hydraulics because I started to realize how the positioning can affect the hydraulics. So from the rotator to the first arm segment, that's the hydraulic. From the first arm segment to the second one, that is the hydraulic. And from the second arm segment to the bucket, there's the hydraulic. So an important thing to note, the reason they're so far out, so that's the point where the hydraulic connects to the arm. And basically that's just to give me leverage, and you can see it's the same on all of these. So that is, this point right here is where it connects to this arm, and this point right here is where it connects to the bucket. Okay, so you might be curious about the other end of the hydraulics because you know, where the hydraulic connects to the arm it's controlling. So that's just pretty much the last point going this way. Or I guess the closest point. So the other point, and these all have about the same length to them, about 200 units, because I like a lot of length because I have bad experiences using hydraulic suspension and the wheel flipping upwards. That's why they're so long. Even though from here they don't actually look that long. But. So you might notice that this one's angled up a bit, and that one's angled down a bit, and that one's angled even more down than the previous one. And that is because of how my arms move. So let's just say, for example, that this one rotates upwards at about 45 degrees. So you can see I've bent the hydraulic in that direction a little bit, and let's just say this joint rotates at about 90 degrees, and you can see I've bent it even more in that direction it rotates. And let's just say the bucket rotates through 120 degrees, in theory anyway. You can see that's even more bent than the last one there. Alright, so I'm just going to show what happens, or how the hydraulic moves when I basically unstow the arm. So let me just go ahead. So basically raise it. And from here it's kind of hard to tell, but you can see it sort of moves in a curve and goes back level with itself. Yeah, kind of hard to see from here. But let me go ahead and rotate this around, and I'll show you the hydraulics on the rotator in a bit, but yeah, just spin it around really fast. So this hydraulic here, yeah, so it has moved around a bit because I did rotate it, but should be fine. So this is where it pushes from, over here, and this is where it connects to that arm. So this is just looking at the hydraulic shift here. Ooh, you can see it a little bit better, but oh, it's kind of hard actually. So you can see the kind of angle that hydraulic is at right now when it's not extended. And you can see the angle it's at now. And you can see how it kind of moves at a curve in between those two. And again, the point that's actually moving is the point that's actually connected to the arm there. And it's pushing from the other point. And you can see that again with the bucket, which actually needs to be a bit stronger, but oh, that's the wrong lever. I believe this one should be even more, actually no, you can barely see it, but again, rotating in about a circle until it gets level with itself, thereabouts. And that is my basically boom setup, and I'm gonna show you the rotator hydraulics next. So just like on the prototype vehicles, this one does have the same structure where you have the hydraulics all pushing from here or pulling from here, depending. They can spin it around, and that requires a bit of E2. So if I were to stow this real quick, and you can see the structure is kind of like a triangle. And I just rotated the points around the 120 degrees. I'm using 3 hydraulics. So let me actually open the E2 first. So let me go get it. Alright, so I got the E2 here. Very rough and kind of jerry-rigged, but I gave it some instructions, but it's kind of difficult explaining things with instructions. But so basically I have 3 length outputs for my 3 pistons. I have an array, and If I wanted like 4 hydraulics instead of 3, I could just add a 4th length output like so. Call it length 4. And I'd also have to do that down here. So length 4. And I also have to change this little index. But I'm just going to leave it to 3 right now. So I mentioned something about picturing the rotator on a coordinate plane. So if you look top down at this, so yeah, I know I have a radius of about 500 on these hydraulics. So actually, if I were to look at the center of my rotator, it's just about there. So 500 that way, 500 that way, 500 that way. However, the hydraulics are pushing at a point that's 1,000. I want to say 1,000. Yeah, 1,000 units that way. So if you were to overlay like a coordinate plane on this, that point would be at 0, negative 1,000. And, well, you wouldn't need to know the coordinates of the points with the hydraulic attached. They're a perfect circle about the origin, so you can either see here the settings, hydraulic count, you put that in manually. And you can see that home point, the point where the hydraulics push from. I have it set to vector 2, 0, negative 1,000. And obviously my radius as well for the hydraulics. And if for some reason I did an upside down triangle like I did on my test crane, I could change this angle offset to like 180 or negative 180. But I actually built this one the right way around, so that's fine. Yeah, so there's just a quick E2 I made just to make something that rotates with the hydraulics, and that takes an angle input. So angle desired. Well, actually that's a number, but 0 to 360. I'm pretty sure negative numbers will work. Yeah, because an angle can be, 360, 720, negative 360, negative 720, that kind of thing. So right now this is only set up to work for the rotator, and I have my levers controlling my other hydraulics. What I'm probably gonna do is just merge all the stuff in the same E2, so it's not a general purpose E2 anymore. It's just kind of being controlled by the seat on some key bindings. But this E2 right here is, that's how that works. Alright, so it's been a while and a few things have changed. But I wanted to go ahead and show off the pistons. There's a few pistons. Oh, and also I made a bucket while, basically in the meantime. And that has pistons. Pistons here, piston here, piston there, and a piston there. And also animated is this cool little like bracket for the bucket. And all the pistons do work. So if I remember which lever it is, I think it's this one actually. Yeah, so this is kind of awkward, but you can see how that bracket sort of deforms. That is not the piston E2. Well, it is, but it's not a piston. So basically, to make these pistons, if you think about it, there's going to be a hollow at the origin position. Let's put a precision alignment point. That's my PropInertia controller, but there's going to be a hollow there, and that's just parented to the arm. So that thing. Just that, basically local to the arm, parented here. And that looks at this position. The position of this gate. Another hollow. So there's a hollow here, parented to the, well, base plate, I guess. But there's another hollow parented to this hollow, and that is going to be like a moving hollow, so it shares the angles of that hollow over there. But it just moves in and out, so that's actually the gate that I parented this prop to make it slide, and I can show you that in a second. There you go, so it slides in and out, and that's all technically all two pieces, but parented to the same hollow. And pretty much all the pistons work like that, so a hollow that looks at what it is you want to track, and a hollow that just slides in and out to maintain a certain distance. So let me see. Yeah. This is kind of hard. Yeah, that one slides in and out and looks at what it's aiming at. It aims at that other arm. And even at the base, there's a little piston here. And you can see that one working. Likewise for the bucket. Now for the bucket, I actually have one prop-to-mesh controller for my two hydraulic bases. So these look at a position on this prop over here, because this is technically two pieces and that one piece. So that looks at a position, the average of these 2 points. And I also have a prop-to-mesh controller for the pistons. Probably don't need one, but oops. You can go back to hiding. Just trying to put one of those on it. And so that first controller just looks at, or I guess the hollow, because it's parented to the hollow. So that just looks at the average of these 2 points. And the other one just slides in and out from that one. So I can show that off. And just move a little bit closer. Like so. I even have one for rotating the bucket. Let me bring that one closer. I should barely see it from here. Excellent. Yeah, and that kind of works. Pretty cool. Now, I've already been modifying the C2 because originally it's just supposed to control the animation hollows for the pistons, but it's also doing this bracket, and that is the C2 right here. So it's not gonna work like this when I clean it up, because you can set an offset on the origin, so that's the base. So in this case, let me see. Let's just do, actually that one's kind of screwed up, so let's do this one. So if I were to get the coordinates of that, 46 and 19, see where that is me to. So that's the second one. So there's the offset relative to the base. And then there's the offset relative to the target. So if I were to get that point over here, which is where my little gate is, very cool. You can see I get pretty much the same coordinates, 67, 36. Yeah. And I also have an axis, so I'll have a pretty weird thing where if the axis is, well, if it doesn't rotate around the axis. Not in all cases, but you can get some weird rotation going on. So the way I select my axis is, so in that case it was the right axis, axis 2. But you want to get ideally an axis that points all in the same direction of your axis of rotation, pretty much. So not the front axis. That would be kind of bad, I think. But I'm using the right axis, so it rotates around like that. So you won't have any weird angles. But the reason I need to clean this E2 up is, well, you gotta manually set your piston count, even though it kind of already knows. Another thing that you have to do is you have to have a lot of inputs, and that's gonna stay the same, but the way you set the inputs is you have to scroll down in the code, and you can see you have to set them like that. So I have all those origin inputs for my bases, targets for my targets, and angling and moving are just for what I'm going to be using, what I'm going to be parenting to the angling and moving hollow, basically. So I've named a bunch of shaft ones and pistons, air shafts and pistons. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. Could do this with an advanced entity marker, but you have to keep track of the order, so I think I'm gonna just have it work like that. Yeah, so I went and built a whole bulldozer blade and didn't say anything about it. But the way I built that is pretty similar to how I built the crane with my axes and hydraulics now. You would think that this would just be a bucket that's just hinged around and moves straight up and down, but I went ahead and made it overcomplicated with a separate joint. So basically, this plate right here has its own axis that moves up and down. I can actually show that. You already saw it, but there you go. And the bucket actually keeps orientation relative to these beams. And I'm just relative to this plate right here, which is the beams. And the bucket can open and close, or, you know. Yeah, I guess empty relative to the beam. So I have more hydraulics for those. Those are 8 hydraulics in total. And I went ahead and added more settings on the little constant value here. And if you're wondering how I named this, basically there's a tool in Wire called Namer. So yeah, hydro settings for the rotator, arm 1, arm 2, bucket, dozer hinge, dozer blade, and all of that. So another thing, you might notice that the bulldozer is pretty rigid. Fairly strong anyway. And you might not know just by looking at it, but the arm as well is pretty strong. compared to at first where it was pretty floppy. Still need some ball sockets because I can flip the bucket around. Even if I were to rotate it, pretty strong. And the reason they're so strong is because they have more PropInertia. So if I were to go ahead and, oops, no, that's probably fine. So if I were to look at their inertia now, okay, I'm not sure why the bucket doesn't have changed inertia. I guess it doesn't need it. But for the arm, 1,000, 1,000, 4,000, 4,000. Same for the first arm. And for my rotator, I went ahead and increased that to 5,000. For the bulldozer, I actually had to increase this to 5,000 as well, even though this is like shorter and lighter. And that's for both the dozer blade and the dozer hinge. And you have to have an E2. Actually, you don't. There's an inertia tool as well, but if you don't have the inertia tool, you can always use an E2. But if you use an E2, you have to do it every time the thing spawns. So I have a bunch of inertia settings over here. And if you're wondering why it's written like this for the arm, I kind of wanted to keep the profile of the arm a little bit, so it can twist easily. But as far as well, like pitching and yawing, it'll be pretty resistant to that. And they're actually applied over here. But this is a tip I got from Meta. He was working on his mix, and well, at first I wasn't able to put a whole lot of constant or damping through the hydraulics because they'd start spazzing out, as things do in GMod. But if you increase their inertia, they can handle a lot higher constant and a lot higher damping. So I went ahead and increased the inertia and increased the constants and dampings, and that makes the whole thing a lot more rigid, basically, and tougher. Now I still need a ball socket to stop these segments from flipping over. But even just fizz gunning them, you can see they're pretty tough. So yeah, since I last talked about those arm segments, quite a bit has been, well, basically I modeled quite a bit of it. I'm not really sure how to go about, well, I don't think I can go about recording it because I built way too sporadically to do any sort of time lapse. I might do a walk around later, or fly around later of the model. But one thing I do want to say is that I do keep basically backups of all my models, or not backups, but like prop versions. So I have one for the body, which is what I'm looking at here, and I have one for the bulldozer bucket and the excavator arm. Weirdly enough, I don't have the piece that goes here, so I'll have to go grab that from somewhere. But basically, if I wanted to make a change or a correction to the model, it's really easy if I keep a prop version around, because I can make the change, prop to mesh it, and scoot it over. So yeah, that prop to mesh really helps with FPS. Another thing it helps with is resizer, because this is a lot of resizered stuff. And even if I was in a garage building this on a server somewhere, and I flew out of the garage, even though I saw it spawn in and flew back into the garage, I would freeze because of all the resizered stuff. And I'm not sure why resizer does that, but so I almost forgot to mention, you might have been wondering why my pieces for the body were colored all weirdly. And that is because when I prep to mesh, I can only select entities with the same color, only select entities with the same material, and that makes it easy so I can hold shift and right click any one of these preps, and that'll all get prop to meshed. Yeah. So that's just one thing that makes it easier.